In this video, we are going to cover the basics of Docker in order to Dockerize a Django application, and we will talk about some of the most important Docker comments that you absolutely need to know. So first of all, let's start with a few definitions. Docker in simple terms is a tool that lets us package, distribute, and run the software in isolated environments, which we call containers. And these containers run independently, but they share the host system kernel. And to create a container, we need a Docker image. So we are going to create this Docker image very soon. And this Docker image basically is a lightweight, standalone, and executable package that includes everything that is needed in order to run some piece of software, including the code, runtime, libraries, etc. And a container, you can say, is an instance of a Docker image, which is used to run the images. And basically, this approach leads to many benefits, including improved resource utilization, faster and easier deployment, as well as simplified scalability. After the brief theory introduction, we are now ready to Dockerize our Django application. And for this, I started a brand new Django project, which I named Backend. So inside of the backend directory, I have the core, which is our main project folder. Here I also have the DB SQLite 3. So this means I ran the migrations and I have the manage py file. So to sum up, I've started a brand new Django project and I ran the migrations. This is basically what I have done. As you can see, I also included the to-do md file, and this is a cheat sheet for this tutorial series. So today we are starting with the backend, which is about Dockerizing a simplified version of a Django app. Probably we will need part 2 for this, but after today's video, you will be able to Dockerize a Django application and run the basic Docker commands. So for the next videos, I have planned the front end, and this would be either Next.js or React.js app, Postgres, pgadmin, Prometheus, Grafana, Traffic, Nginx, Celery, Redis, Portainer. Not necessarily in this order, but this is the list which I would love to cover. If there won't be any engagement, you won't like these videos, I will simply shorten this list. We'll see how it goes. So for now, let's not worry about this to-do md. I'm going to close it. And before we create our Dockerfile, let's cover the installation. So in order to work with Docker, we will be using the Docker desktop. Head over to docker.com, products, docker-desktop, and over here we will need to download the proper version of the Docker desktop according to the operating system. So for me, this would be download for Mac, Apple chip, but there's also for Windows and for Linux. As the next step, make sure to open up the Docker desktop. Finally, if you are using Visual Studio Code, go to the extensions, find Docker, and install this particular extension. So now we are ready to create a Dockerfile, which is used to build Docker images. So I have my development server running, and I just want to show you that this is what we are going to Dockerize. So I haven't done absolutely anything in the Django app, and we want to run this, what you see over here, from the Docker container. This is the goal for today's video, as well as, of course, learning all the necessary basic Docker commands. So back in Visual Studio Code, I'm going to add a new file, and I'm going to name it Dockerfile, like this. So as the first step, we need to specify our base image on top of which we are going to create our custom one. And for this particular example, I'm going to use the Alpine Linux, which is a lightweight distribution, and it will minimize our image size. So let's write from, and then Python, specify the version. I'm going to use 3.10, and then Alpine at the end. Note that this is not the best version for running Django apps with data science libraries. So I experienced it a few months ago and I won't recommend it. It's very painful to work with Alpine. I switched to a normal version, which by default is the Debian-based image. So this is just a note, a remark, which might be helpful for building your own applications. So again, I'm going to use the Alpine. And as the next step, we are going to run APK update. So first of all, run is used to execute commands during the image building process. And then we have the APK, which is a package manager in the Alpine Linux distribution. So we can run APK update. And then what I'm going to do is to add Nano, install Nano. And I will need Nano at the very end of this particular tutorial to fix one issue manually from inside the container. So we will access the interactive mode, we will get inside of the container, and then we will switch something in the settings py file to fix one issue. Okay, next we need to prevent writing PYC files to disk. So let's write env, and this is a key value. We can write Python, and then don't write bytecode, and set it to 1. And then let's prevent buffering the output, which could lead to problems with logs when running the app in the container. So again, env, and then Python on buffered 1, like this. Hopefully I didn't do any spelling mistakes. Next, let's create and set the working directory in the image file system. And all the commands will be executed from this particular location. So for this, let's write work dir, and then I'm going to set it to app. And I will show you how this works in practice, how this looks in practice once we access the container in the interactive mode. So now we can actually add docker ignore, because we will copy all our files, but I want to exclude the Dockerfile and the to-do md. So we can add a docker ignore file. So let's write docker ignore. And here I'm going to specify the Docker file and then the to-do md. Very similar to git ignore. So now I'm going to save this and close this. And yeah, we have our work dir set. So at this stage, I think we can pause the work in Dockerfile and simply create our requirements.txt file. And then we will cover the concept of layers. So what I'm going to do is to go to the terminal, quit the development server from running, and then I'm going to create the requirements.txt file. Pip freeze greater than requirements.txt. All right. So now we have our requirements.txt over here. Perfect. So it is important to understand that layers are instructions that are cached, or the instructions are layers that are cached. So each instruction is in fact a layer. So we can do some work with the requirements.txt file in an early stage, and we do it in order to leverage the caching mechanism and make the build process a little bit faster. Of course, this is only for the case where the requirements.txt file hasn't been changed. So again, I will show you how this works in practice. So first of all, let's copy the requirements.txt to app. Okay, so we are ignoring for now all the other files. We are copying the requirements.txt. And then once we have the requirements.txt, we can run pip install --no cache dir, and then r, and then requirements txt. So this will install all the packages that we have in the requirements txt file. Okay, so as the next step, we can copy the rest of the files. So we can write copy dot, so everything that we have over here to the app, right? And again, if this is not understandable, I'm going to show you how this works once we get to the comments. So first of all, we need to finish our Dockerfile, and we are basically almost done. And once we have our Dockerfile, we will start with some basic comments, and I will explain why we did this like this. So why we copied the requirements txt first. Okay, so as the next step, we can expose the port that Django will run on. However, this is not mandatory. This is just a good practice. So in our case, it's going to be port 8000. And finally, the last instruction is going to be to run the development server. We do it with command and then Python, of course, in a list, as you can see. So each word of this particular command is a separate element in the array. Python manage py run server and then 0000 8000. So we are starting the development server, and we use this 0000 to run our app in the container and being accessible to the outside world from the container. Okay, so let's save this, and yeah, let's actually build our image based off this Dockerfile. So as you can see, I have a blank window of terminal. I'm currently in the backend directory. So inside I have my Dockerfile, and we can actually start by listing the Docker images. So in my case, I cleared all the images before recording this video, so the list should be empty. And in fact, it is empty. So Docker images is the command to list all the images. And right now we are going to build our image from the Dockerfile, okay? So let's write docker build, and then we are going to give it a name with this -t, and I'm just going to call it my image. And then I'm going to add a dot at the end, since I'm in the same place, in the same path as my Dockerfile. If you would be in a different place, you would have to provide the path to this Dockerfile. So let's press enter. And as you can see, we are building. Okay, we are now, we have a, so we have an error. I misspelled the requirements txt. Let me fix this very quickly. Require, I missed an E, I think. So let's save this, and I'm going to clear it and rerun it again. Okay, we are running the instructions, and now we are installing the packages, as you can see. So this takes a little bit, you can say. And for me, it takes probably a little bit longer, since my internet connection in the place where I'm recording videos is very weak. So this is why it takes that long. All right, guys, so it took quite a while because my internet connection over here is really, really weak. So I made a pause, and now I'm back once we've built the image. So now we can write Docker images. And over here, we have our image that is created. So now if we rerun this again, it will take it will take less amount of time. As you can see, it's almost instant. It's all from cached. and it's done in just a few seconds. So yeah, as the next step, I'm going to show you that we are going to return to this particular step because I'm going to install some package. It can be, for example, Django REST framework. So pip install Django REST framework. Okay. And then I'm just going to update the requirements.txt file. Requirements.txt, there we go. And then I'm just going to rebuild the image. So as you can see, we are installing everything again from this particular step. All right, so it took a while for me to rebuild the image, and the option in the Dockerfile no cache dir didn't help because this option prevents from caching the downloaded packages. So that's why if you combine it with my weak internet connection, it just took a little bit too long. Sorry about this. But yeah, we can move on and we can list out the Docker images again. And over here we have the newly created image and the old image, which I'm now going to remove with the use of Docker and then image rm, and I'm going to provide the image ID. So now we have a confirmation that we've deleted an image, and we can write Docker images again, and we see that the old image has been deleted. All right. So as the next step, we can actually run the container. So we are going to run a container based off the image that we have created. In order to do this, we need to write docker run, and I'm going to run it in detach mode. This way, I will have my terminal available. Otherwise, you would have to open up a new terminal to run some additional instructions. And yeah, we will simply specify the image name. So in our case, it's going to be my image, but we are also going to map the ports. So what we want to do is to map port 8000 on the host to the port 8000 in the container. So 8000, 8000, like this. And yeah, let's see if this will work. Okay, now we can list out the containers with the use of Docker PS. And over here, we have our Docker container. So this Docker container, I'm just going to minimize it for just a second. I know it's going to be difficult to see it, has a random name, Sleepy Shannon, and a container ID. So we will refer in the future to either the name or the ID to do some additional comments. For now, let me just make it bigger. And yeah, let's see if we can go to see our app. So I'm going to simply open a new window. And there we go. So we have disallowed host because we actually would need to provide this particular address in the allowed hosts. So in the settings PY, we would have to include it over here. And this is something that we will fix a little bit later by going into the interactive mode, by logging into the container and manually adding something to the allowed host. But this is something that I will show a little bit later. For now, we have some kind of a confirmation that our Django app is working. However, we have an error. So yeah, as the next step, let's stop the container. To stop the container, we can refer either to the name or to the ID. So I'm going to grab the name and then docker stop, and I'm going to pass in the name. So now if I run docker ps, I have an empty list. But if I run docker PSA, as you can see over here, I have my container with the status exited. So it exited around 11 seconds ago. Now to remove the container, I can use a similar command, docker rm, and then I need to again provide the name or the ID. This time I'm going to use the ID. And there we go. So now if I run docker PSA, I will get an empty list. So we can simplify this process by adding the rm tag when we are running the container. So I will show you how this works in a short way. So docker, let me make this window a little bit bigger. Docker run, and then --rm, and then I'm going to use p, and I'm going to map 8000 to 8000. And I also want to run it in detach mode. And then I need to specify the image name, which is my image. Okay. So now if we run docker ps, we see our Docker container. But if we now grab the ID, for example, and write docker stop, it will be automatically removed. So now if we write docker PSA, the container doesn't exist. After stopping, it has been automatically removed. All right, the final comment that I want to show you today is the interactive mode. So I want to go inside of my container. So I'm going to run it again. And then I'm going to run docker ps. And here we have a random name. So maybe I'm going to show you one more thing. I'm going to show you how you can add your own name for the container. So let's write docker stop. And then let's write docker run detach, and maybe somewhere over here I'm going to write --name, and I'm going to set it to, I don't know, my awesome, or just let's keep it a little bit shorter, awesome DJ, something like this. Okay, now let's write docker ps, and here is the name awesome DJ. So let's access the interactive mode. So for this, we need to write docker exec -it awesome DJ, or the container ID sh. And now, as you can see, we are in the app, in our work directory that we have specified inside of the Dockerfile over here. And we can run ls. And as you can see, we have the requirements txt manage py, the SQLite core, but we don't have the files included in the Docker ignore. Okay, so what we want to do is to fix this issue, because if we refresh the page, it still exists. So let's go to core, and then with the use of nano, let's open up the settings UI. And now I'm going to go to the allowed hosts, and I'm just going to set the allowed hosts to everything, okay? Just to keep it simple. Then I'm going to press Ctrl X, and then I'm going to press enter to confirm. Sorry, first I need to press Y and enter, and there we go. So let's refresh the page, and there we go. We have our Django app running from the container. And over here in this interactive mode, you can run, for example, migrations, Python manage py migrate. But of course, we need to go to the parent directory. So Inside of core, we of course didn't have the manage py file, but in the app directory we do. So we can write again Python manage py migrate, and there are no migrations to apply. But this is basically how you can work inside of the container using the interactive mode, which you can activate with the use of docker exec -it, the name or the ID container, and sh. So I think we can finish this video over here. In the next one, I think we will tackle volumes, maybe mention a few words about networks, and we will work with Docker Compose. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and hope to see you guys in the next one.